Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leftology podcast. And for this episode, I have a kind of a reverse interview with my friend Mike. Mike's been on the podcast before, back when we used to only do it on Twitch about, what is it? It's like a year and a half ago now.
Something like that.
Would you like to introduce yourself, your background, I guess whatever you do, anything at all?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Mike, and as far as anyone listening to this is concerned, I'm just a random guy from South Carolina.
A friend of the show.
Friend of the show, friend of the pod is probably, thank you for that. That makes me feel really welcome. Friend of the pod, have been involved in a little bit of politics in like the local sense. I've ran for state office and had a little bit of experience of that in 2018, and got involved with, like I said, local Democratic Party for a while, but like the entire time definitely being more of a socialist, and trying to find like my place in what that looks like in the South, and what it looks like in my community, and honestly still kind of trying to find that out, but yeah, so always enjoyed Cameron and just kind of all the insight that he kind of gives into just leftist conversation. So I'm super interested in his experiences and opinions, and just chatting some stuff out tonight. So yeah.
Yep. I'm a sophomore in college now, so I have some opinions I can back.
Yes, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, more than a recently graduated high schooler when we started this podcast. It is so weird to kind of look back, especially considering I've only been able to make 15 episodes of this show.
That's a really quick, that's a lot. Like that's covering a lot of ground in only 15 episodes.
Well, it's 15 episodes over a year and a half, so
well,
it is a little slow.
Is it slow? Okay, yeah. I mean, like the jump from episode to episode is like a significant leap of time.
It is a significant leap. Like I'll have like read multiple books in between like podcasts, and like completely change my, or not completely change my worldview. That made me a bad podcast host.
It's called rightology now.
Yeah, we're going to turn on to rightology. We're going to be discussing why we should increase the border walls and make them 100 feet high, put spikes on all sides of them, and make them electric next episode.
Yep. See what Ben Shapiro's up to.
Yeah. I mean, we do talk about the right and the alt-right a lot on this episode, or not this episode, this podcast. And that was actually something I was going to make a video about, is that I was thinking on Twitter this week, and people were talking about like new anti-SJW stuff, which is like, it's like 2013, 2016 stuff. And I watch it. It's very lazy content of the channel they uploaded, which is just like, it's going over like Dr. Phil and stuff like that, of like critical race theorists versus like James Lindsay. And then the guy shows himself and he's just like, that's right. That's how you argue, in like the straightest way possible. And then he cuts back to the clip. Like, it's extremely lazy content to the point where I can't tell if it's a troll or not.
Yeah. Like,
but I was thinking about that and I was like, wait, it's 2022 now. 2015 and 2016 were what? What's that? That's like 6 or 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. So like the little tiny kids that were watching like only like Minecraft YouTube back then are now like people who have political opinions, who had no experience of Gamergate at all and have no understanding of what happened. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should be a little bit concerned about this stuff.
So like the lack of cultural understanding, or living through that cultural moment, not preparing, sorry for sounding old, but the coming generation for recycled, rehashed right-wing pipeline stuff. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about. Especially, I didn't go quite as far. The furthest I got was like a couple Jordan Peterson videos when I was younger, which is not honestly not that far in the pipeline considering a lot of other people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Never got to like that actual like Nazi stuff like Stephen Molyneux, and I don't.
Yeah.
I may have only watched like one Ben Shapiro video. It's a very small amount. Like I was quite lucky, but I also 2018 was kind of like a big height in BreadTube, even if they have more followers now, was a lot more coherent.
Yes. I'm not as familiar with the ecosystem of BreadTube, to be completely honest, because surprisingly, I don't consume a whole lot of content. I have a few podcasts that I listen to. I read a bunch of articles. Every now and then I'll pick up a good book, but I am somewhat aware that compared to like 2016, 2017, that community has actually expanded a lot, and there's a lot of diversity in creators. A lot of people seem to focus on like one or two big ones, like, oh, this one or two creator is BreadTube. It's like, no, it's a fairly large conglomerate of pretty, I know you said coherent, but I would almost say that it seems like it's got a lot of diversity in it too. Does that make sense? Maybe coherent and like it's all.
Well, I was mentioning about 3 or 4 years ago, it was a lot more coherent when smaller, which I think it benefited from a little bit. There's too much there's so much infighting now.
I see what you're saying. I got that backwards, but yeah, that makes more sense.
And I do think the one of the main questions I think we were going to go over is, where does the left go from now? How do we achieve socialism or whatever? These big ass questions. And I think this
random guy gonna answer it tonight, baby.
Yeah, welcome. The guy with 151 YouTube subscribers is going to answer you how to do socialism in 10 easy steps. Number 1.
The government pays for stuff.
Yeah, government pays for stuff. 2 through 9, I don't know. Number 10, socialism.
There you go. Hey, congratulations. I think I got no, I left my confetti downstairs. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah, imagine for YouTube, there's confetti here, and then podcast, you're already imagining the visual part of this. Just imagine Mike put out a confetti thing.
Send that to your editor.
Yeah. My editor, like I can afford one. So I guess what's the first question you wanted to go over for this reverse interview?
Well, I think for the reverse interview, it would be, would you be comfortable going over kind of what we talked about, like maybe your philosophical underpinnings and how that's sort of maybe taken shape over the past couple of years? Because in the last year and a half of your podcast, how that maybe has changed. If you feel like we can do that.
It's a big question. I can answer now that it's probably a little bit of postmodernist to the degree that I have it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't read for postmodernists. I haven't read any Leotard more than like a page that I got today out of the reader. Maybe like 20 pages to Deleuze. I mean, a lot of it comes from like videos and stuff, because like these works are really hard to read. A lot of existentialist thought. I had a class in that. I've read multiple books, specifically the de Beauvoir one. I don't believe in like the radical freedom kind of stuff of Sartre, if you know what that means. And I guess that's kind of that, and Frankfurt School of Thought is kind of like the underpinning of my leftist thing. If you know what those words mean, they mean something to you. If you don't, they mean nothing to you.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
It's just a weird conglomeration of those, kind of more focusing on ideology than the material conditions, neo-Marxism type stuff.
Weirdly enough, I had no desire to know much about that recently, but it is one of those things. Sometimes life brings you topics and information that you need to learn and process and learn to talk about. And that's one of those things that I'm currently kind of processing through, especially with regards to the Frankfurt School, because I feel like that gets brought up a lot by like a wide variety of people. And like, it's always for different reasons. Like I've heard people on the right talk about the Frankfurt School. I've heard people that are critical of the the like neo-Marxist thought, be very critical of it because it's more ideological. And then I've heard people be like, no, there's some like good information, especially when it's like, hey, yeah, materialist critique's important, but there are more things going on in the world, and we've got to like think about those too. So yeah, that is one of those, and it always comes back to like Frankfurt School. So I don't really know, honestly, a whole lot about it other than like there's a few influential thinkers that seem to have sprung from that, and a lot of people talk about the new American left that have come from that. So, again, layman here when it comes to that.
From my understanding of it, I need to read more of these. I have One Dimensional Man and then Dialectic of Enlightenment are the two books, and I've watched multiple lectures on this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But the basic, I guess, idea is you have critical theory, which starts here at the Frankfurt School,
Sure.
which is in contrast to traditional theory, which is how philosophy had been viewed up to that point. I guess aspects of traditional theory are like grand narrative stuff. The Hegelian notion that history is leading to like some, I guess, utmost truth, that truth exists objectively, and that I guess the law is supposed to be the sense of justice rather than a power dynamic, which critical theory flips.
Right.
Truth is power dynamic, all this other stuff. The ideas we have are not just on our own. I guess I was thinking over it the past few days after we had that conversation on in the direct messages on Twitter of kind of just like what's like one sentence that I could say to support why I want to look at the Frankfurt School, and it is that if material conditions were all that was between us and socialism, it would have already happened. It would have happened like 100 years ago. But there's a lot more in between us and socialism than just, I mean, I guess there's like the military, which is not an easy thing to get over. But there's also these ideological considerations that that keep the working class or whatever expanded class system you want to put since the 20th century that Marx didn't necessarily have the ability to comment on, that prevent us from like reforming or revolutionizing ourselves into like a post-scarcity world, which is, I think, is the bare minimum for socialism.
Yeah, at this point. Right.
Just big, broadest term possible. Scarcity, not really that big of a problem anymore. That's socialism right now. That's the level we're working at.
Just convince everyone scarcity is not really a thing.
Scarcity is not something we have to worry about.
Yeah. Okay, I see where you're going. Okay.
Which I think is the bare minimum of what you can qualify as post-scarcity. It's not really something you have to worry about.
Right. The importance is drummed up a lot higher in support of, privatization of stuff.
So the Frankfurt School goes through this, and they find different ways of criticizing the current world and imagining a future one. Marcuse, which is my favorite one of the Frankfurt School, kind of just sees a problem with like imagination and the working class as a whole. Or one-dimensional, we can only think in capitalism kind of deal. That I think that's One-Dimensional Man's kind of premise. Adorno deals a lot more with aesthetics, like beforehand, the representation stuff. If you ever heard of the idea of the culture industry, that's him. And then there's a contrast between Adorno and Walter Benjamin, who was a contemporary of Adorno, but he didn't make it out of Germany before the Nazis found him. So I want to get this book by Verso puts out. It's like aesthetic theory, and it has like 5 thinkers, and it's like the last 2 are males between Adorno and Benjamin. But by the time of Dialectic of Enlightenment, which is 1947, Adorno has a completely different aesthetic theory. I don't want to get too deep into this because we have a lot more stuff to talk about.
No, you're good. I have a very, like, again, another very layman kind of observation.
But just to finish this off, Benjamin, well, he was still in Germany. Adorno goes to America, and then he makes all these comments after living in America for a few years, like I think over a decade after living in America. But Benjamin and Adorno's original theory was that leftism could be spread aesthetically. Adorno, by the time of Dialectic of Enlightenment in the late 40s, is fairly critical of this idea, seeing how much everything could be co-opted in movies, film, and so on. That's the same thing. I don't know why I said that twice. But I mean, that's 1947. Here we are, 75 years later? And we're in a much more predicament. We have, what is it now, like 24 Marvel movies put out since 2008.
Sure.
By Marvel alone.
Sure.
people just line up to the theater. A lot of it is military propaganda, even if I'm excited to see it. So it's a big problem with aesthetics and leftism, which I don't know if enough people talk about. I don't know necessarily. I can't be an authority at saying even if it is worth talking about. So
it's something like among the realms of amongst all the things that get considered about leftism, especially online, I don't think that it's inappropriate to ask questions about the role of aesthetics, because it does play an important thing, whether it's being co-opted or whether it's agitprop or whatever. You can kind of see it in a microcosm like Twitter, because people pick and correct me if I'm not using the concept of aesthetic correctly in this, but like
it's just philosophy of art. That's it.
I mean, well, people create and they nurture an aesthetic that is representative of their identity, which again, in leftist spaces, there's a look, there's a flag, there's an anime avatar. Sometimes it kind of depends. That could be a whatever, there's a specific handle, like all of that is signaling, and that's great and all, but like that's helpful for categorization, but it's also not substantive. That's it. Substantive. I can't do words sometimes, like, because you never know. And maybe that's a great example, zooming out from that and bringing it into the real world. Just because something looks a certain way doesn't mean it is, which is where, that's a common sense thing, pulling it back out of the realm of deep philosophical thought. Like, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, it's the line that Frederick Engels has on Authority. It's like they think they've changed the world because they added the peoples in front of the police or something like that. I don't.
Yep.
That's not the exact quote. I know it's not the exact quote, but it's just a funny one talking about aesthetics.
Well, the irony is that aesthetics is, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, you can look and you even see it with like the Nazis. Like you make something look attractive, and you draw people to it, and people have a problem questioning something that everybody's being drawn to. Like I don't know. I could go off on a tangent on that, but okay, that gives me a good idea of
there was
a little bit better idea.
The stuff we were talking about before the episode started about like the problem of representability and co-optation. And I remember a joke I put on Twitter yesterday, and it was like, "Oh, you're a real socialist and your politics are representable?" ? Or something like that.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing that.
Everything could be co-opted. And it's just like, oh my God, what do we do now? And then you talk to the average worker and they'll tell you, what the fuck are you talking about? And
it's literally the Jesse, what the fuck are you talking about meme. Like, and that's another interesting thing, is I do see a lot of critique being like, oh, this can be co-opted, therefore we shouldn't do it, which is like I think the pendulum swinging too far in the other direction. It's like, oh, because like, so you would argue, for example, maybe, I'll just go with this because it's the first thing that's coming to mind.
Like, I'm gonna get off screen for a second. You can continue talking. I just want to put it I want to put more light on my face.
Yeah, you're good. You might be someone that is concerned about like social justice or whatever, and you're on the left. You could hear such a wide variety of takes when it comes to that phrase alone. And I think there's some takes that are maybe more rooted in cynicism that are like, oh, well, because that can be co-opted, we need to abandon that term, or blah, 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 blah. And then the other side of it, clearly it's an important aspect of what I consider like the democratization of society, and like having, I don't know, real equity. So I guess that's what I think of when I think of like that joke you made, like, oh, if it's something that can be representable, it's can be co-opted, therefore we shouldn't have anything to do with it. And I don't know that that's always the answer, It's like, that's like,
it's not the answer. It's gonna be a fucking waste of time arguing that.
Yeah. Well, and again, you go on the street and people are like, what are you talking about? I am this, or I care about this. And it doesn't make sense to be like, let's argue about the metaphysics of representation.
There's multiple essays that are like hundreds of pages long talking about that. I think we would have hoped to figure it out by now. I mean, I do have an answer. I need to read more into Lacanian and psychoanalysis, but I think that might be where the answer is, which is
Maybe.
also a big word. Because there's
Yeah, like
if you know anything about it, there's like the Lacanian, what is it? I don't want to say triangle necessarily. That if you've read any Slavoj Žižek, that's mainly what he works with. But it's like the symbolic, which are like the symbols in between, like this means something to you. It's not just like white, blue, and the words, the wall. The imaginary, which is the white, blue, and the wall. And then there's the real, which can't really be represented. The psychoanalysis, this is like traumatic stuff. And I was like, well, thinking about my own journey as a leftist, especially the part going from conservative to moderate to liberal part back a few years ago, back in high school, I was like, okay, well, I'm thinking of writing a conference paper in a couple of years on this, because I don't think I can work it out before the next South Carolina, North Carolina philosophical conference, which is in 2 months.
Oh, crap. Shout out to the NCSC PC.
That thing. Which I mean, it's at the college this year, about like a mile away from mine. So I'm definitely should submit to that conference. But it's just the idea of, I guess, traumatic event being this way around co-optation. Maybe not like witnessing like genocide or like something like physically horrible to you, like, oof. But like, I guess the more psychoanalytic version of trauma, of like kind of opening yourself up. Maybe empathy is the way around getting to the problem with co-opting aesthetics, because capitalism doesn't necessarily work on empathy, I guess is the way I was thinking around. So if there is this like moment of empathy that you can find, and if that can somehow be brought out by aesthetics, that's a socialist aesthetic, I think. That's the closest answer I have.
So, okay. Yeah. I want to speak on that. And before I lose my train of thought, I think about the phrases or the images or whatever. I know you talked about agitprop, whatever, any of that, that's been the most stirring has been the thing that's awakened like, empathy and connection with other humans, and like, hey, there is supposed to be a communal effort amongst people to make a better, I guess, life for each other, for themselves and for each other. And like, so yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see empathy being the way through co-optation, in that empathy is typically very authentic. Am I just using big words there? Empathy is very genuine. I
think authentic's the right word, especially the way I view existentialism, which is the traditional origin for that.
And it's also interesting too, we're, like I said, we're kind of in like sort of the new left area of speaking here, because we're adding all these like concepts of aesthetics and whatever. I think I'm understanding, again, layman trying to put it all together. That's one of the things that like maybe should be considered more, because like if we're going to connect to someone on the street, like if you're going to connect to a coworker, it's not as nuts and bolts, there has to be some sort of like emotional connection. And it's not unreal or not valuable or even some sort of like fake ideal. It's like, if you can connect with another person's sense of well-being and like, hey, I'm here, like I am here for you, you are here for me, we are in this together. I think that's actually really powerful, and it's very human. Like, it is scientific. Like, that is, I don't know. Again, I could be way off base, but I'm just kind of speaking this the best I know how to.
Yeah, I guess to add on to that, I was thinking, and it's like throughout the Cold War and onward, like communism, socialism, anti-capitalism, these words have kind of, I guess, in the main debate, especially after the neoliberal turn in the 70s, kind of like individualism versus collectivism.
Yeah.
And like you had this debate, and I guess the best thought I have is why are those the two choices I have? Why do I have to be a ego alone in the universe or a part of like a hive mind? Why are those my two options?
Yeah.
And I think this like a middle ground is actually what we need, is like a social, like what's the Margaret Thatcher quote? There is no society, only individuals. I'd modify that. There is a society. It's made of individuals. So you have all these people that make a conglomerate. They're not the conglomerate that is made up, that has people in it. It is a conglomerate made of people. Like I said earlier, I probably need to think on this a little bit more. But like this kind of like middle ground between a collective and an individual, it's, I guess, connections might be the best way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, I think of things like that, like, because I kind of identify more as like a libertarian socialist, which people do not understand at first.
It's a broad term.
It is a very broad term, and it can mean a variety of things. But I think it's as simple for me as like saying, like, you know, we're looking to make sure people have the right to self-determination, but we are also trying to build like a community that is accountable to itself, you know, and that takes care of itself and can represent its own interests. And like, so whatever that looks like, I don't have like, this is how it should be, but like you said, there's a middle ground. It's not the supreme, like even as like a libsoc, like I'm not over here like whatever I want to do is the most important thing, but it's like, no, whatever like gives people the most, I guess the concept of like positive liberty and negative liberty kind of come into play in that. Like, I
only believe in positive liberty. I believe negative liberty is a false meta narrative.
Right. No. Yeah. That's we're talking about libertarian co-option, like, or like right-wing co-option of like, the concept of freedom. Like, don't tell me I can't do this, versus like, you know, society has like somehow preconditioned you to not being able to fulfill your own needs or be able to connect with other people, or you know, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I want to get into this, but negative liberty has a lot more presuppositions and assumptions than compared to positive liberty. And it's very white male oriented.
Yeah.
Just leave it there. Okay, that's my clip. Everything, this is going on Twitter. Negative liberty is white male privilege oriented. You can quote me on that. I'll put it in my Twitter bio maybe. Get pissed off at me, quote tweet me, you know.
You have James Lindsay like just coming in hot.
Yeah, like I said on the episode where I went, or the little thing, or the little video I put out before the critical race theory episode where I was talking about James Lindsay. I was like, I want to read his book to make fun of it, but I don't want to pay him. So if there's anywhere you can find, tell me where I can pirate that book, because fuck James Lindsay.
Oh Lordy, I don't know. You just you probably wouldn't even need to read his book. You just go through his tweets, but that's a whole different.
He's a math guy. Like, why the fuck are you writing about critical race theory? You don't know anything about it. You're not a sociology major.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I hate that guy so much.
No, it's fine. Listen, let it flow through you. Okay, no. So far, I know it's a little meandering, but I mean, I love hearing about that. I love hearing about, like, you know, I know we kind of took a tangent off in the Frankfurt School and then talked about
a big tangent. Sorry for the last 30 minutes, guys.
No, listen, I fully expect you to have to edit some of this stuff because I am.
I mean, I listen to podcasts that are 2 hours long, so
fair. I'm trying to like bring up my knowledge level to the conversation.
Yeah, I have to do that for the, what is it, Machinic Unconscious Happy Hour podcast.
Christ, what?
It's mostly focusing on Deleuze and like Lyotard and Lacan stuff. It's above me, but if I listen to enough, it won't be above me anymore.
Well, I kind of do. You know what?
Actually, shout out to that podcast. Please go listen to Machinic Unconscious Happy Hour. I love those guys. They follow me, so I have to promote them.
Do it, promote it, go check it out. This is random internet guy telling you to do it. I'm the random internet guy.
They have a lot more followers than me, so
there you go.
I mean, if you're listening to this, there's like a 50% chance you listen to them already.
There you go. I do want to dovetail. So we did kind of get a little in the weeds. Hardly, we're not in the swamp, but we're definitely a little in the weeds. how does, you said earlier, you're kind of at a place in your life where philosophy makes sense. You have the time, the effort, the energy, the focus, the incentive to be delving into these things. And you can kind of pick apart how that informs your economic, political worldview. But like for people that's not their focus of study, how important do you think philosophy is, or what is a good way to practice that kind of stuff? Me personally, like when it comes to philosophy, I dip my toes in a little bit. I'll read this or that, but like, I consider I have a set of ethics that I try to live by, and I have I don't even know if I want to call it a moral code. I guess it's a moral code, but I do have some semblance of spirituality that comes from more like kind of Ram Dass stuff in like evangelical and like just a mishmash of different things. But I honestly, for me, like, I think my political ethic probably informs more of my belief system. Maybe I don't know. That's probably flipped at some point, but for everyday person like that isn't super deep into this, would you recommend them doing that? Or do you think that would be beneficial? Or do you think there's another area of focus that, like, I don't know. Does this question make sense?
To a degree, I think it does. I'm going to start off by referencing, there's an Onion video out there that they made in the last couple of years. And it's supposed to be this, I think, laid off steel factory worker or something in the Midwest. Yeah. And he talks about 2 minutes, for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe. I'm not sure how long the video actually is. I'll put it in the description below. But he's talking about how he voted for Donald Trump and how he regrets that after reading a bunch of feminist gender theory. And it's an amazing joke, because it's just like, yeah, if somebody could read feminist gender theory, they probably wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. But the thing is, that's not accessible to the fucking working class or to the majority of Americans. They don't have the time for it. They don't have the vocabulary for it, like someone that can like spend their entire day doing philosophy like me can.
Yeah. And that's literally, and that's not a slight. Like, isn't the average like reading level in the United States like 8th grade?
I wouldn't know, honestly.
It's not super high. Hold on. Yeah. I'm gonna look.
I do think that there is a benefit to looking into some philosophy. A lot of it you're gonna have to learn a new language for, pretty much. 7th to 8th grade. Oh my God. Yeah,
7th to 8th grade. So anyway, yeah, learn another language, i.e. German, probably.
But look, like, you just have to like learn all those words and stuff like that. Like, there's some words, especially like in philosophers like Hegel, which I do not recommend you read, that they just don't translate, because it's better leaving that way as like a German word that means its own thing, rather than trying to bring it over to English, which you kind of like solidify and authoritate that term when it needs to be left open. And a lot of philosophy is that way, which makes it pretty bad to show to the average person.
Right. Because it's also kind of meant to be like taken in context, especially a lot of like Marxist stuff. Oh, I'm going to get yelled at help me Jesus, in a dialectical method. Like it's an ongoing conversation and back and forth, right? Essentially, I'm about to get murdered.
That's, from my understanding, that's Kant's dialectic.
Okay, that's Kant's dialectic. Okay.
Marx's dialectic, which I disagree with.
You're right.
Comes from Hegel, which is a historic view.
Right.
Of people read this in very many different ways. I need to read this book. My friend Eric gave me a commentary on Phenomenology of Spirit, Mind, or Geist, however you want to translate that last word. But the idea is, and Hegel focuses a lot more on the idealism, if you want to make idealism versus materialism, which is a whole different debate that I will not discuss right now.
Sure.
But humanity as a whole, as a group consciousness, how I translate this is moving through dialogue towards truth or ultimate truth.
Okay.
Do you know the idea of Spinoza's God at all? Kind of like a pantheistic God?
Heard of Spinoza. Not familiar necessarily with Spinoza's God.
Spinoza, from what I know, is a pantheist, which means that everything is God, pretty much. The universe is God.
Okay.
Hegel takes that. I might be making a really big claim right here, but Hegel takes that, and I think this is how I translate the dialectic, in that as a whole, as God is moving towards truth, we are all God. Hegel takes Marx takes that and flips it. It's more materialistic. The contradictions of the past economic system kind of show themselves. They become apparent, and a new economic system comes out of that, and eventually ending in communism.
Got you. So they're okay. I see. So that is the progression of history. Like that is the markers. Like it's not an individual or a quote unquote God moving towards ultimate truth. It is where humanity is at materially in its progress towards communism.
In a Marxist sense.
Okay. Yeah. No.
There are other people that translate it as just like capitalism's that's it. Dialectic done. We fucking erased it. We can't get past it.
Right.
Like it or not, fuck it. Fuck you.
Yeah. So like part of my point in bringing all that up is that like this is an ongoing like conversation. Like there is a never ending like back and forth between so many different like I guess ideas or conceptualizations of like what all this is. And
you can't even translate Hegel one to one, so you have to take it very different ways. You can't even agree on what the word means sometimes, which is not something you can say to the average person.
No, that's exactly where I was going to go with. I was going to say, so clearly as someone that I've had some exposure to this, pretty big interest in it, still don't fully like grasp everything.
I don't grasp it. I just
right. I think if people were honest, they wouldn't really know. I mean, they've been arguing about it for 150 years. So anyway, not to malign people putting the effort in, but like person that works with me at work, who again, let's bring it back to where we are in context of history.
The real world, 2022.
2022, South Carolina. We're not a union state. I mean, we're in the union, but like
we're a right to work state.
We're a right to work state. I don't know why. Right to work state. So organizing labor does not happen.
What are we like? I think it's 2.3% union for all workers in the state.
Something like that.
And I think public is worse.
Yeah. I mean, there's like two things you can't be in the South, and one is like a union member, and the other is like an atheist. And like, I'm just calling it like I see it.
I don't think you could run for governor as an atheist in like Texas and a few other states. There's a few places where you can't run for office if you're an atheist still.
Yeah. So like, we look at that kind of thing. And how do you even begin to translate this big chunk of arguably unknowable information? Like you would spend your entire life looking through all of that, and you like distill it into the most important things that's going to move your community towards class consciousness. Because I think that's, again, and people are going to argue even necessarily what that means, but like
it's a Western leftist thing.
Say what?
It's a Western leftist thing, categorically.
There you go. See, you can even break that down. So like, what does it look like in your context to move towards socialism? Like, how does that even work? And you can't even like. Some people would say you'd need to read all this theory and be able to like use the right language before you can even begin the discourse. To participate in the discourse, but like, what does that accomplish here?
There's some problems. I mean, in spaces like sociology, I could get it. Like, if you're going to talk about race, be competent in talking about race.
Yeah.
No matter really your race, because like you're always going to have unconscious bias and stuff like that. Stuff the average working class person has no understanding of. I have a taking off point from here.
Go, please.
There is. I used to date someone that went to that went to school in Charleston for college. So I drive down there a bunch. And there was this one time, it's where I want to say it's about 10 miles or so after I-95 turns to I-26 heading towards Charleston. If that means anything to you, I think it's the like Holly Hill area in South Carolina. I don't know exactly how to describe that.
Okay.
But I was like, hey, my Wi-Fi is not working. I can't play Spotify right now. So I'm just going to turn on the radio. And I ended up on this political radio station because it might have been one of the presets that I had in just a different area, or I just might have scrolled. It's been like a year now since that happened. But I remember the conversation the person was having. I mean, you're in South Carolina. You're not really going to have a leftist or a liberal radio host that isn't national. But it was this local guy in the area, low country South Carolina kind of stuff. And someone called in and it was like, I have racial, sensitivity training coming up at my workplace or something like that. In like a somewhat Southern accent. I won't call it like deep necessarily. And right, like, should I leave my job? How do I deal with this? Should I sue or something like that? It's been too long for me to remember the rest of the location, or the conversation. I think he was asking if the radio host wanted him to quit his job or something like that for having to do all this stuff. I don't remember how they answered either, but that's the problem you have. Like sociology can describe these people. White Fragility is a book about these people. And the answer is racial insecurity training, or whatever it's called, makes these people a little bit more racist. And that's not a good thing. So you're dealing with these big terms while trying to get these people that don't like big terms on your side. And it's kind of contradictory. Marcuse has the thing, it's like a balance of theory and praxis. A praxis without theory is just going to be completely useless. It's going to be just protesting for nothing. Theory without praxis means nothing. You know, big words now. Congratulations. And then you got to find this good balance of just like, okay, I know what I'm protesting for. I know how to effectively protest. But I'm also not reading too much.
Yeah, well, it's meeting people where they're at. Like I've had a lot of good conversations. And what works? Empathy. And
I think empathy is the way forward. Like if you're just going to get pissed off anytime someone doesn't use the correct terms, especially if you're talking about somebody that has absolutely no background in sociology. Sure. Like if I say that stuff, call me out. Like I own the 1619 Project. I should be able to tell before. Like I've read a lot of sociology stuff. I should be able to hold myself a little bit more accountable than the average factory guy. But like if you're getting, like, there's some things you should get pissed off for that. Maybe if they say the N-word or something like that, you can get pissed off. But like, there's some words I think you should give them a little bit more leeway just to try and convince them over, so they can understand later when they're on your side why they shouldn't say that anymore.
You're moving people towards, like, so you're helping people see the world in a different way. And like, I know, especially during all the protests during last summer, during like the BLM protests, like there's a ton of conversations at work that just were like, well, hey, let's break this down. Like, have you considered, like, maybe this is why people have issue with like how police operate in this country? Like, if you went through this experience, like if you felt this, if you saw this, would you not like relate to that somehow? And like helping like have that conversation through empathy, and helping people kind of open up. And generally, I think good faith people will be open to that. Like, this is not me saying, hey, we should like hang out with Nazis. Like they're okay. Like, no, fuck Nazis. Like some people should get punched. Like, again, whatever. But for the most part, there's a lot of people that actually just being empathetic, meeting them where they're at, works really, really well. And most people, I don't know, maybe I'm naive. Most people don't want to be shitty. They just don't know that they're shitty.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of apolitical people, especially, or the moderately political people that just they know they're voting and they know what party they're voting for, and that's about it. I remember this comment. What is it? I'm trying to remember what something popped in my head and it popped out. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was kind of a response to that, and it's just oh yeah, it was the I don't explaining this concept to you kind of dialogue stuff that you see happening. And I guess I'm a moderate on this, I guess, dialogue. Like I've had some friends that have problems with it, of just like, because you're this identity, you should be able to explain all these things about being this identity to me. Sometimes people just don't understand their identity. They're just that. They don't care about the sociology behind it. But if you know the sociology, philosophy, politics behind your identity, I think to a degree you owe people to explain it. Maybe not the people you're talking to, but the other people in your identity. I mean, I'm a white guy, but like I understand a lot of stuff and I can explain it to a lot of people.
Sure.
The main reason I say that, that you, if you're competent in this stuff, you owe your community, or the community of people that you're competent in, especially when that community is not there to talk for themselves, to talk about it in that light, because Nazis will talk their fucking head off.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, they'll take the narrative.
They'll take, like, you're not talking for the other person's sake. You're talking for your community's sake. Because if you don't talk to somebody, a Nazi might, or someone on the far right might, or someone that's not a Nazi on the far right might. Like, that's the problem you run into right there. It's like, try to be competent in stuff, talk to people about stuff. Definitely there's some people you don't want to talk to, especially if you're not someone that's got white. I'm a white guy. I'm like 6 foot. Nobody's gonna try and kidnap me or anything like that, or try to just like sucker punch me on the side of the street or something like that. That's not something I have to worry about. Like, if that is something you have to worry about, I get it. Cool. Especially just talking to certain groups. But like, if you can find like an apolitical person you can explain this stuff to, probably should.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think there's layers to it, because like it's all contextual. Like, for me, like, I do find that, like, if I know about something, I don't know, there was this maxim, maybe that's not the right word, but it's like, now that you know, you have a responsibility to share.
That sounds like, I think that's maxim.
Yeah. Like, once you see it, or once you've learned something, you have a responsibility to speak about it. You can't just ignore it. And I think that applies to my life a lot. I think it's a little different when we're talking about, I think, minority groups, and like expecting them to bear like a burden of like having to explain everything that they're going through to just the random person that inquires, because I think there can be a little bit more sensitivity with that, or there should be. And like, it really just depends. In the meantime, though, the stuff that I know about, because I mean, those are conversations of like, it's one thing to talk about like an experience for a minority person and what they go through, and whether it be like race or LGBTQ stuff, like that to me is different than something that is like maybe and will vary from situation to situation, than something like class, where it's like, okay, because I know this, I'm going to speak about like economic information because I understand this, or there is an aspect of like minority interests and minority issues that like I think maybe I do have like a responsibility to speak on, especially not speak over, but to like in a workplace where it's like, a majority of conservatives that might see like BLM or something as like this huge negative thing. It's like, okay, well, no, I think because I've had conversations with people, and like, it's important for me to transfer that information, that knowledge, and those experiences on, and help other people have empathy, and maybe change their viewpoints. Does that make sense? Kind of.
I mean, yeah, especially for our area. I remember, I think it's episode 7 of our podcast, the guest we had on SDL. He was talking about particularly, and I've had like TikToks talk about this as well, of like, I think, I'm not exactly sure, we might have been talking about like why Republicans think they're the majority when they're not really over 50%. And it's because those people live in like Republican heavy areas, like around us, Like Effingham, where you work, is probably fairly white heavy. Coward and Scranton are probably both, like, just for Florence County alone. Lake City, I don't know. But for like the country areas of the part of South Carolina that we live in, those are going to be very semi-isolated, white heavy areas, even if those towns are around like 50-50 white minority rate, like Florence and Lake City, I think are. And the thing that happens there is that those people that are like semi-isolated or like almost completely white communities, I mean, that's a pretty urban county in South Carolina. If you go throughout the South, not most counties are not that urban. So that semi-isolated white community is what probably a lot of the South is configured of. So you just, when you're driving out, you only see these Trump signs. You only see other people that have Trump flags and stuff like that. Or they're flying a Confederate flag or something like that. So you come to the idea that people everywhere are like this, and that this is why you see people that are against the electoral college or that are pro-electoral college. Like there's no liberal states, there's liberal cities or something like that. And it's just like there's more people there. Just because you live in the middle of the country doesn't mean those people don't exist. And they think the world is how they see it. As there's a very funny video I remember coming out after the election. It was this guy standing up at a Red Lobster and he was like, "Did anyone here vote for Biden?" Nobody raises their hand. He's like, "Exactly, the election was fraud." It's just like, what liberal is going to fucking Red Lobster? Tell me. They've already eaten brunch. It's a Saturday. Like, where are the liberals? There's not going to be a liberal at a Red Lobster in the middle of bumfuck nowhere.
No, they're too busy eating babies at that point.
Yeah, we're at Planned Parenthood eating the stem cells.
Exactly, just mainlining them. No, I mean, but it's interesting because there is such an intersection between all of these things, and again, I think the intersection of things beyond just a material perspective or materialistic perspective, like the real world actually is an intersection of a ton of different, like, oh God, what's the right word?
Ideological?
Maybe, is that the word? I don't know. Like,
I think the quote that might be what you're thinking of, at least from my point of view.
I'm running off like 3-4 hours of sleep, so sorry.
It's okay. In the political world, dealing in the real world is not dealing with an objective world to a degree, I guess. You're not dealing with a fully material world there. You're dealing with stuff fogged by ideology.
Sure.
That's the world you have to deal. That's the real world of politics. Yeah. You're not just dealing with reality one-to-one. You're dealing with it behind the screen, in between you and reality.
Yeah. And I would almost, and again, I don't know if it's true, but like, I think it would be almost impossible to completely diffuse that fog. Like, I think maybe
the left has it too as well. Like sometimes I forget Republicans aren't just like random bots online.
Yeah.
Like I'll go home and it's like, oh, people actually hold these positions. So what the fuck?
Yeah.
These are just people I could yell at on Twitter for Twitter points.
Exactly. Right. Well, again, there's such a like disconnect between the online world and like what's happening in real life. And I'm not gonna shut down people for doing good work on social media. I'm not gonna there's a place for it. But like sometimes Twitter brain's a real thing. And I've been I've been guilty of being that way before too. And I don't know, like life is complicated. If you're going to talk to the person next to you, they're not just like a lump of flesh and bone. I mean, biologically, sure, but like they're also, if you crack open their head and like look into their brain,
they're going to be dead.
They're going to be dead first off. But
there was stuff happening
you're going to be able to see their ideology right there, just sitting on the cranium.
Yeah. Pink lumps.
Pink lumps. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just confronted with the fact that like, you're going to have to do a lot better than being really good at one type of analysis to really reach people and make effective change in the world. Like, and I say that more as like a thing to leftists. It's like, you can have a really great understanding of pick your favorite fucking flavor of leftism, but
Mao.
like unless you, it doesn't matter. Mao, Kant, whatever. It doesn't fucking matter.
Kant is a leftist.
I don't know. I just, I know. I just threw a name out there. Like, and it's not really gonna mean much if it doesn't do anything. I don't know. That, I guess that's
I'm
where
a philosophy major. If you go up starting talking about Kant, I'm walking away. I don't care. I hate Kant.
I can't deal with it. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry.
I don't hate Kant. He's just a boring ass motherfucker. Like,
maybe that's what this should have been, is just you ranting about your least favorite philosophers.
Kant's not my least favorite. I mean, there's much like the Thomas Aquinas is worse, but I mean, he's like a Catholic philosopher.
No, I'm familiar.
I'm familiar.
Listen, evangelical. I
had to go over in class this semester. It's like faith and reason. It's just like, I don't get this. Like, what is going on? Like, I can get a body without organs in the Deleuzian concept, but I can't get what you're talking about with, like, what is it, like God's law, no, the eternal, divine, and natural law, or something like that. It's just not in my program anymore. I don't believe in human nature.
Interesting. I'm gonna throw a thing out that I read that is random, that is also related, and it's kind of philosophical, so I feel like I'm contributing. Have you ever read The Eternal Fascist or Fascism?
I've listened to the essay.
Yeah, Umberto Eco. Highly recommend to all of your podcast listeners. Fantastic, I think, analysis of what fascism is, and I don't know. I personally think it's indispensable.
I've talked to some communities that don't like it. I think they're confusing it with the other 14 points that were put during the George Bush era, but that's not Echo. There's a lot of different versions of fascism. I mean, Deleuze thought psychoanalysis was a little tiny fascism or something like that. Oedipus complex, stuff like that. I might be misconstruing that, but I think Echo is probably the closest I like. I mean, we could talk about that for a moment.
We can. I just wanted
some people
to
just
something.
thought. I've talked to some people.
Their
opinions aren't great, but they talk like it's just too broad. It fits too many countries, and I think they're missing out by not reading the essay, because it really starts off with like explaining all these fascist nations. Like, if you want to explain fascism, you have to understand it, at least just the 30s and 40s. You have to be able to explain Japan's fascism, Italy's fascisms, Germany's fascism, and Spain's fascism in one fell swoop. And that's what Eco is dealing with. What he said is, you have, like, if you have all the letters lined up, you have to connect A to B, B to C, and C to D, and you have to be able to somehow, or there might be connections between A and B, there might be connections between B and C, there might be connections between C and D, and you have to find a term for fascism, a connection from A to D. Yeah, and that's why it has to be so broad.
Yeah. But it is like, it's one of those things where, because sometimes it can be hard to spot or identify, having those touch points are useful. And it's from someone that is like, was from Italy at the time, Mussolini. So it's like, okay, this is it's based in reality.
Fascism is a particularly hard concept to, I guess, nail down, because it's fairly anti-intellectual. So it kind of just moves away from definitions to a degree.
It's a little wiggly, but it's always gonna like come back to some sort of weird like veneration of the traditional, but like there's always some weird like when they say traditional, it's, I don't know, it's always kind of nodding to like anything that's beyond I don't know. Like
there needs to be a whole other episode on like the concept of like the fascism and stuff like that. That it's just too broad to discuss in one episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I was thinking of reading Mein Kampf for one. Don't clip me on that. For a
Ladies
conference
and gentlemen,
paper.
we got him.
But like Google Books doesn't have the entire thing because I didn't want to actually buy it because like either I got it from Barnes and Noble and I had a receipt that said Cameron Karsten book, Mein Kampf, or I bought it from like the random sailor and didn't have that receipt, but I might have possibly given money to neo-Nazis.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of stuck there. And I was reading
it. When the bookseller nods at you, then you're like,
no, I'm criticizing this. And then I get shot. Yeah. But I was reading the first few paragraphs, and it's supposed to be Hitler's life story as he's telling it in what, like 1922 prison or something like that. And it's like Zizek was talking about in one of his talks about how poorly written this book is. And I was like, it can't be that bad, I guess. Like word to word, sentence as a whole, sentence structure reads well, but as a paragraphical text, absolutely horrible. Like he starts the first paragraph talking about like his mother and his father, and by the second paragraph, which is on these paragraphs are only at max maybe 10 lines long, at max maybe 15 actually. These are not long paragraphs. By the second paragraph, he is talking about how Germany should be united by blood, and by the third, he goes back to his story. That's how poorly written this book is. Like that convinced millions of Germans, like the people who made fucking Hegel and Heidegger, that convinced them. That like it's a very low bar of like a book. Like like most manifestos probably suck, and Hitler's is probably on that sucking list.
Yes, I mean I would agree. You have no critical response from me on that one, but like it is funny.
Like you have to be able to accept the reality. There could be a fascist manifesto that is fairly well written. Like, is it bad? Yes, but it could be fairly well written. But none of those exist. Like the Turner Diaries suck. Yeah. Mein Kampf sucks. Like these people just can't write. Like the anti-intellectualism, I think, hurts them.
It's like, remember what they took from you. Yeah, your fucking ability to write a decent, piece of literature. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add to that. Like, it's
a little insulting, to be honest. Like Hitler can write one of the worst books of all time and then take over Germany and like half of Europe. And then leftism has like one of the biggest like intellectual traditions in history. It can't do jack shit.
Mediocre, it's like pretty much like mediocre angry white guy.
I mean, if you're talking to a working class, like the Mein Kampf is a lot easier to read than to lose. I mean, I'm not gonna kid you.
Okay, so there's a really uncomfortable point to that. Like, why, maybe one of the difficult struggles of like leftist conversation is that, like, I mean, literally our entire like interview that we've had has been a lot of concepts that most people aren't going to really grasp. I don't really grasp completely. And like, yet if you come along and you keep your message simple, you don't want to like water it down or make it to like,
I think getting rid of a lot of these concepts, especially dialectical materialism, will be generally extremely helpful to the left.
Well, just explain like, I'm sorry, I keep like having interruptions here. Going back to the aesthetic argument, there are certain like concepts and phrases that can be communicated very concisely. I think that can get to the heart of what most leftists are trying to accomplish. Or at least if you're going to like break it down into what does leftism look like in your community or socialism look like in your community, and maybe it looks different than what socialism looks like in someone else's community, find a way to effectively communicate that and build like, go ahead.
I remember yesterday I was reading part of Mark Fisher's final lectures. Specifically, I was reading through the first lecture of that series of Post-Capitalist Desire.
Yeah.
And he was expounding on something that I've noticed beforehand in past economic systems, is that like within like feudalism, you have a part of the economy that is capitalistic, and then eventually it becomes the majority of the economy through hundreds of years of revolution. And before that, feudalism existed under the slavery system of the Romans and stuff like that, to a degree. But like Mark Fisher is talking about, like what sectors of our economy are socialistic. They have to exist, and we have to find them. That's the kind of stuff that we want to expand on.
So there's a really good, I mean, so when it comes to the United States, the union tradition, I think organized labor and leaning back into that is going to be a huge deal. I think there's already a wave of that kind of reoccurring, which is wonderful. Like, that's a lot of people that probably prior to 2020 had no idea that they could organize and get like actual benefits.
It's really hopeful, especially like the Starbucks stuff and the Amazon stuff, them finally unionizing.
Absolutely.
I think,
John
was
Deere?
it? There was 2 in Buffalo, one failed, one passed, and now there's a bunch of Starbucks around the country, maybe like 10 to 20 that are trying to unionize now.
That's going to do more.
You just have to do it once, and then everybody else knows they can do it.
Yeah, that's going to do more for socialism in the United States than any online argument that's ever occurred ever.
I think a UBI would help too. And Mark Fisher was talking about that in his lecture. I mean, that's kind of an appeal to authority, but like having a UBI or base income, even if it might cause some inflation, which, I mean, I'm not an economist. I don't care about economics.
It's more made up than most philosophy.
I mean, yeah, to a degree. But like giving someone a base level of income that's not like if they work more, they lose it. That's going to give people a standard of living and a standard expectation. I think on what was it? It was let me look up what YouTuber this is. But they were talking about the problems of the working class in the early 20th century. It is FD Signifier. He's a pretty good YouTuber, especially on African American class issues individually. And it got me thinking a little bit, because he was talking about there were union strikes in the early 20th century, and the unions were primarily white, and the black workers would be used as scabs to replace them. So like
that antagonism was purposeful by the bosses too.
Yeah, I think what he goes into is kind of like how like working class antagonisms among themselves kind of end up hurting them, because like white people kept black people out of the unions because of racism, and eventually the black people replaced them, which causes more racism, and
which is why
the black people aren't at fault at all. And like, you're not getting mad at your boss and bringing it to be like, hey, we used to work here, we have skills too, we don't want you off the job. Just mean the more workers we have, the less people they can replace us with. So you have the solidarity, and it's just like, okay, why didn't that happen? It obviously didn't happen. Here we are 200 years or 100 years later, not 200, it's not quite that long. But I think the thing that we would benefit from a UBI, and I'm, like I said earlier, I'm not an economist, is that workers in America, especially in the past, I don't know to what degree now, maybe because of debt, they have to think of this way, but a lot of us are stuck in a short-term thinking cycle. We can only think about what's going to happen to us in the short term. So white workers are concerned about getting replaced by black workers, so they don't allow them in the union, or other stuff. Racism makes them not want to allow them in the union and stuff like that. Yeah, and racism is supported by black workers taking those jobs after they go on strike. But black workers do that because they need jobs. They have to survive like that. They weren't invited to the union. They didn't get the wages or higher wages that would come out of that solidarity, nor did they get the jobs that might come out of that solidarity. So everybody is hurt in the interaction of having to exist within this short-term thinking.
Right.
Except for the boss. The boss wins.
Yeah, they just make money. Well, again, that's why the struggle against, like, it's a dual struggle. Like, it's a struggle against racism and capitalism. Like, you know,
it's a chess game and you're stuck with pawns.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a really good point. There was something that I wanted to add to it, but I
lost your train of thought. Yeah,
I did. I lost my train of thought.
I do that on podcasts a lot.
No, it's somewhat terrifying. But no, I mean, it's a good point. Oh yeah, the labor movement in the United States. Yeah, I mean, so speaking on the 1920s, yeah, like you said, the unions just, I think the vote to include like black people in unions, like, it got denied by a very slim margin. But in my opinion, that probably doomed the labor movement, because not long after that, it started to really tank. And that's, again, that's illustrative of the fact that like you can't ignore the racism that exists in the United States when you talk about like actual like trying to develop like a socialist base in the US.
And I think this leads to a point that I did want to get in this
Yeah.
interview. And it was something I commented on a couple days ago under someone that I've had on the podcast post. And it was talking about like race reductionism is a bigger problem than class reductionism in the political or like the actual world. Because like socialists aren't the mainstream. So like you're stuck with conservatives and liberals. And I responded with that's not my comment, but my comment was that reductionism is the problem. If you want to reduce the race, then you're completely leaving out the class problem that's inherent in race and cause the current racial, I guess, politics of the day. If you're going to do just class consciousness, you're not going to solve any of the problems, because the racial divide in America and many other countries is what keeps the class system going as it currently is.
Yes.
You need to understand all these problems in common if you really want to fix them. And that's a hard problem to go through. I think it was a curse and a blessing the 60s were, because I think politics finally aligns, like the labor movement to a degree finally aligns with like the socially left movement. But then the labor movement dies in neoliberalism 10 years later. So it kind of hurts to a degree, because the working class is fairly right wing. You're kind of hit with this double-edged sword. It's just like, okay, finally everything lines up, and it's just like, where'd everything go? It undercut it. I mean, capital maneuvered, and it undercut the labor movement and outflanked them from the right, and won a bunch of like working class people over to more conservative viewpoints. And then as far as economic movement, it just it killed it. So that is a good point, though. Like I was trying to think of another really important labor thing that's happening in the United States. Just the Kellogg Workers.
Yeah, the Kellogg Workers.
They got fired, and then a bunch of bad stuff happened in the factories because you just hired a complete new set of workers.
Right. But things that translate in the US, union for sure. And
UBI is fairly popular in recent
years. The UBI thing.
Andrew Yang's the only good thing he ever did was popularize that.
I do have some caveats with that. I think UBI can be used to gut like social programs if you're not careful. But again, if you construct it correctly, it can be really helpful.
There's a book I read. I mentioned it in the last podcast episode talking about that. But chapter 4 of the book, it's a very short book on Verso. I forget, it's like Automation, the Future of Work or something like that. But it talks about chapter 4 talks about the different ways that UBI can be oriented. If you want a fuller explanation, I think it's somewhere in the last episode. But the right wing is $1,000 replaces welfare.
Yeah.
For this left wing, it replaces salary.
Yes, that is a very powerful distinction that has to get made, and I think that's something that Yang kind of like waffled on.
Yang was kind of like his was much more right wing.
Yeah.
The most left wing, I don't think we can hope in my lifetime to ever get, but I do think social programs on top of a good, maybe what is the standard now? I think they want maybe $1,400 a month. Because the problem you had there was if you replace welfare with these programs, at most, maybe people end up with people that were previously on welfare end up with maybe $200, $300 more a month than they had previously, which is a problem because you have all these people now that didn't have these problems of disability or poverty beforehand that weren't getting checks that now have extra money to go to the beach or something like that. But you have this money that maybe now it's a little bit more secure to get, but you can't do all those extra things that people were allowed to. So you didn't really benefit from this program. You might got a little bit, you can get slightly fancier food now or something like that, but that's about it. You can go to Ruby Tuesdays instead of McDonald's every other week.
You can finally, go to Red Lobster.
You can go to Red Lobster and talk about how many people here voted for Joe Biden.
Exactly. You haven't quite gotten go to Planned Parenthood and eat eat stem cells money yet, but
Mm.
you'll get there. So the other thing, oh crap, I keep losing it. I apologize. I really am like,
I think we're at it's the left
Yeah.
wing, I think to a degree is cursed because the programs it fights for, if implemented, would all increase like the popularity of leftism in the country.
It
But we're
would.
all stuck in a reality where none of those programs exist.
Exactly. And like the pathway to getting to them is so blocked. Like there isn't.
We're at like a reverse death of the author. Like it's a pre-birth of the, like the author isn't born yet, so everything it does gets to be defined. If you know what death of the author means,
I've heard it come up a lot. It has to do. Let me just try. Let me take a shot.
Good example is Donald Trump, actually, because he's like extremely pro-vaccine, and like if he died, people could make him into an anti-vaccine figure, but he's not dead, so they don't get to do that.
Right.
But like Medicare for all, UBI, and stuff like that, they haven't happened. It's a reverse death of the author. So as long as they haven't happened, people ideologically can define what they are, even if it's a complete lie.
Yeah. Well, okay. So full circle. Can't judge a book by its cover.
Well, you can't even tell if it's the right book.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I was trying to be clever and bring that around, but yeah, no.
Yeah. Somebody put the Wizard of Oz cover over James Joyce's Ulysses. That's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. So there's no one really knows what's going on. It's very difficult to make any headway realistically. The U.S. has a lot of work to do.
The left in the U.S. The U.S. is already doing a lot of work stopping us.
Yeah. The left does.
Oh, there was one more point I wanted to bring up. I thought you would think it's funny, but Mark Fisher in these lectures brought up what was it? The Leninist superego is what he called it. In that, I mean, it's a psychoanalytic term, the superego, if you know what it means. Vaguely, the traditional understanding is like where your morals are, but it's just like, I guess actually it's like anxiety, stuff like that. The stuff that like, it's overhead, like pressures and stuff like that society places on you, all of that stuff. But the superego or the Leninist superego, as he explains it, is this kind of idea that socialism is kind of like there's this bar, and if you don't reach it, that's not you're not actually trying to go to socialism or something like that. So you need this big, like even like reform isn't enough. You have to do it in this one big movement.
Yeah.
Like even if reform gets to this eventually, you have to do it now. You're not doing socialism.
Right. It's if it's not done this way, it can't work. And I think I was having some interesting conversations today about it. Like again, I maybe it's naive, but I feel like progress is progress.
There's also in that it's the left becomes nostalgic in a way of doing things as like revolutions or reform or whatever as they have been done instead of actually responding with the current reality.
Right.
So like the Leninist superego gets stuck up on how the revolution in 1917 went, rather than focusing on, hey, maybe different versions or different ways of achieving something are necessary now.
Yeah, I would argue it is. It's super necessary. Like getting hung up on the past. It is useful to understand the past. It's useful to learn. But like where we're at, I mean, I hate to be super negative about it, but I mean, capitalism kind of won. Like
it's winning.
It's winning. And what is the best resistance to like capitalism and neoliberalism in our current context? And we were actually talking about like the social democracies of like Latin America, and how like I think there's a pretty broad support amongst every type of leftist. You can see it on Twitter. You can get a good gauge. Like no one's going, man, Lula's he's an imperialist. Like no one's saying that kind of shit. Like, we're rooting for that. And it makes me wonder, like, what could the left in the US do to build that kind of movement? Because it's not, I wouldn't say it's purely electoral. There's clearly like, it's a lot more activist oriented, and it's a lot more like protest oriented. And there's a lot of like, I would say, is dual power kind of stuff going on. But then it does take that energy to the election cycles. But then again, they actually have candidates that are running on those type of platforms. And so like, the United States, I think the left, it really sucked. Like Bernie was, I think, the last person to effectively bring that kind of message that like, I'll still run into conservatives that are like, man, I liked Bernie. Too bad they fucked him over. And it's like, yeah, man. And you look at the stuff he was talking about and you say, okay, well, what is American leftism and like, what is important? And what connects with people. And I think you can look at like some of the concepts that built that movement. And, in retrospect, people have maligned it in a lot of different ways, but like the energy in 2016 and even to some degree in like 2020, for that type of leftism in the US, like that's what made sense here. And I think if we had been able to achieve some of those things, we would have been able to resist neoliberalism in a way that hasn't been done since the fucking 70s, because nothing's been done since the 70s really to stop it. Like the Democratic Party has continued to move. It has only offered vague resistance to to neoliberalism. I mean, again, I do have some politicians I absolutely love, but whatever. Sue me, yell at me on Twitter, but like overall, there hasn't been a lot of effective resistance against that. So like back in 2016, when you had him saying we're going to call out corporate ownership, of our politicians, we're going to try to get rid of Citizens United, we're going to get like rid of dark money, like all of the stuff that we know is wrong with our system. We got to do those things. It doesn't, and it may not be in a in an old writing by Marx. It may not be whatever your favorite philosopher has like written down before. Like it might be a new problem that we have to solve with a different like strategy. I don't know. Maybe that's really simplistic. There is one other thing I wanted to say because I finally came back to me. Why reduction? What is why is leftism? Why is socialism not comprehensive? Why doesn't the way we like conceptualize socialism, why is that not a comprehensive approach to everything going on in the world? We reduce things to a single issue, and I know that's Marxist, but like we've talked about all night, that works in a classroom. Does it work in the real world?
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, if you really take every issue, no matter which issue you want to, you can find one source to it. Like, yeah, capitalism's the problem with everything.
Yeah, sure.
What the hell are you going to do about it, though, if you don't understand? Like, if you want to do class reductionism, cool. You're not going to solve anything because you're not going to understand how class problems manifest themselves in the real world. If you're not willing to understand racial politics, if you're not willing to understand gender politics and stuff like that, that's how class structures actually work. In the real world. There is like the money side of class. There's also a socioeconomic side of class, or the socio part of the socioeconomic part of class to a degree. Of like the women generally make less. There are typical views of women in different class structures and how women should act.
And this is all very American. Like this is. I mean, we're sticking to the American conversation here. Like, these are American problems.
There are literally techno feminists. I think Mark Fisher brought up. They were just like a lot of the problems of women can be solved through material conditions. It's like artificial wombs would free the woman from like her only biological duty or something like that in traditional society. Like there's no argument in it. Like if a machine could give birth, I don't have to. That's not my job anymore. I don't care if I have a womb or not. I do whatever the fuck I want. You can keep the human population steady.
Right. Some people,
like that free, like everything connects to each. If you're not gonna take a step back and be like, okay, I can reduce everything to a class problem, but then like, how do I explain that to people? You can't. because the class problems aren't just class problems. They're racial problems, they're gender problems, they're blank problem, et cetera, et cetera. Words.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm done.
I was gonna say, I've always seen this kind of stuff. And again, like I said, I'm kind of big picture-y. It's like a pair of glasses, you know, like there are times where you have to put on like class reductionism and you see how this through line goes through history, and you're like, okay, fuck, this is why these forces are acting the way they are. And it's like, oh, well, okay, now we got to look at let's look at the lens of like race and how that like has a through line through history. And then it's like, okay, well, let's talk about like gender issues or religion or whatever. Because all of those, they've run through our world and our history simultaneously. It's not like
I don't think you're even doing a proper reading of Marx if you're not willing to be intersectional, because Marx has the theory. It's even if you're just going to do class and religion, as it might have been a problem in 1844 Germany or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Marx specifically noticed that religion followed the pattern of class structure. The Protestant Reformation was a much more individual capitalist style of religion being done compared to the hierarchical feudalist style of the Catholic Church.
Right.
That the king, blah, 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 knights and so on, cardinals, and stuff like that. Like that, there's already intersectionality there of you going to religion is naturalizing the class structure to you of that I'm an individual now, that I can interpret it, that there's no forces acting upon me, which was the way the class structure wants you to think. Those things are being naturalized through these other means. They don't interact with you 100% materially.
Would that be an example of like the development of cultural hegemony? Like sort of like,
I think to a degree, possibly. I still need to read Gramsci. I don't have any Gramsci text.
Okay.
The translations done by Pete, what's his name, Buttigieg's father, are $23 off on Amazon right now.
There you go.
It's 70 something dollars still.
Go pick up
2,000 pages.
Fuck.
Well, it's the entirety of what he wrote while he was imprisoned under Mussolini's Italy.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. I don't know, like interesting stuff.
It's so funny. Like Pete's dad is like, oh, he translated one of the most interesting leftist philosophers in history who had some of the most revolutionary ideas while only living to be like 40. And then his son is like the most boring Democratic politician possible. Like he seems like he's just a Terminator meant to focus on ambition. It's so funny.
The most bland Terminator. I can't talk. Terminator to exist. I've come back from the future to
he's just there
teach you this dance.
He wants to get to the White House. That's his goal. He doesn't have anything beyond that. Like that's it.
Yeah. Well, again, you know,
people that are judge slander.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. This, you know, if you came here looking for Pete Buttigieg's positivity, I apologize. I didn't mean to take in that direction. Yeah.
Ugh.
I think I learned something. I
hope
tonight.
you did, because I've just been saying words for the last hour and a half.
Well, I hope that I haven't brought down the overall like level of nope. Yep, I did.
Competency?
I made it less competent. That's exactly what I did. Thank you.
Well, I mean, you have to deal with the real world. I get to read all day, so.
Well, you know, it's funny because I do have to deal with the real world. And, you know, maybe that's what I can contribute is just an anecdote.
I mean, I've talked about my philosophical underpinnings. I know we discussed it beforehand. Do you want to just finish it off by going over like our political journeys?
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to finish off the episode, because I know there's been a big political journey since, like, what was it, like right after Bernie lost for you. Yeah. There's been one for me, but mine's been since high school. Reverse interview. What's your political journey?
Sure. Yeah. Great. You friggin' uno'd that. I mean, I was a lifelong Democrat, man. Like I grew up weirdly enough, my family were Democrats. I didn't have to do the like conservative to like go to high school and then become a Democrat, or like I wasn't like super conservative whatever. This was also pre-internet, or like right at the birth of shit posting on the internet, and I just wasn't super into it because I had a dial-up modem. So like I really didn't have a conservative pipeline I went down. Actually, that happened to me in college because I got involved with like I said, an evangelical community. But even then, like I was still what you might consider progressive, at least in that community. And that kind of just gas pedaled once I got out of college. But I really don't think I got super into leftist politics until probably like I started paying more attention to Sanders. Because I was, like I said, I was kind of a progressive Democrat. And I knew that Republicans, as simply as I could see it, just wanted to cut taxes and were not really helping people. And the Democrats at least wanted to like, fund schools, which is a good thing. But like I said, Sanders really kind of like was the first person to lay out, these are the problems with America that are super fucking tangible. They're super concise. He didn't bog it down with lots of with theory. It was just like, listen, there are people with a lot of money that are calling the shots and making it so you don't have the kind of voice you should. And this is how we fix that. And it was such a winning message. It won me over. And I think from like 2016 on, it's just been an evolution of those things. And I found myself still in like Democratic circles because guess what? It's the South. And if like
you're kind of stuck with.
But I've also found a lot of like diversity of thought in Democratic circles too. Like this, I get so frustrated with the
It is frustrating sometimes, especially at the college I go to. Like there's to the left, there's me. Yeah. But when our Democratic Party was active back in like the early part of fall semester 2020, there was also the guy that was like cheering on Joe Biden in the primaries. Yeah. So like you have that big divide of like the most moderate possible, and then there's me. Yeah, that's a real thing. That's a real world though, and you have to learn to like find some common ground with those people. Like I have problems with Democratic leadership and pundits, but like your average Democrat, like I mean I don't know, it's especially in the South very diverse, very different. Yeah. And I had to learn. For me, it's hard. Like I can't start a Democratic Socialist Party at my college. Like I came here to infiltrate the rich and take over the world. Like none of these people are socialist. Exactly. Right. You're playing the long game. I'm playing the long game. I go to the rich people college getting a bunch of debt, but I know the rich people now so that I rule the world. And I'm just like, hey guys, even though I was completely openly a socialist, I am now a socialist in the government. And we won, guys. Everything is socialism now. Welcome to socialism now. I'm not paying back my student loans. Communism. I mean, if nobody paid them back, would it be that bad? No, I mean, honestly, everyone listen to this. Just don't pay your student loans back. Just don't do it. Pay your taxes. Like legally, sure, pay your taxes. Student loans? What are they going to do if nobody pays them? That money's just going to disappear. Don't do it. Don't pay your student loans back. Sure, the economy will crash, but that's funny. Is that not funny? It's happened before. Multiple times. We're fine. The line goes down for once. That's funny. It's all a cosmic joke. Now we're getting into some absurdist shit. I like it. My theory of history. Yeah, right. To kind of land the plane, I found myself moving further and further left. And I couldn't really find exactly where I fit because I think I believe in a lot of things, to be honest with you. Like I see the value in a lot of things. I don't immediately write off a specific section. I found myself being very anti-fascist, but like, and still very, I would consider like engrossed in, I call myself an SJW, like, cause I do it unironically. Cause it's like, there's a tendency to be like, oh, SJWs. No, like, fuck it. I care about social justice. Like that's important. And I don't have to, I'm not worried about being like, ooh, cringe. Like, no, like that's important. And I care about it. And that's okay. I care about these things. And it's like, also it does feed into my conceptualization of socialism and like, people having the right to self-determination and democratic control over their own lives and the means of production and all that good stuff. And like, so that's where I ultimately found like, oh, well, libsoc's a pretty big fucking umbrella term. So I'm just going to go with that. Yeah. But it's like maybe
dem sock in the streets, lib sock in the sheets. I don't kind of situation.
I guess for your political journey, something also I want to get out of, because it has been about a year since we had it's been over a year since we had our last politician on. I mean, it's been almost 4 years now since you ran for office, but like, what was that experience like? Because like, that was about the time that we were starting to get to know each other.
It was, yeah. No, I mean, that experience was great. Wouldn't trade it. I met a lot of cool people, met a lot of shitty people. And that's also where I like feel like the cynicism towards people involved in that is unwarranted, because there are so many good people that are trying fucking hard. They're doing whatever they can. And like, to me, a Democrat doing whatever they can to change like their state is better than like a really well-educated socialist that's just dumping cynicism on everything, you know? And I think that like that experience taught me that I don't know that I necessarily want to ever be a politician. But I have to, like, ever since then, I've been kind of trying to find a way to get involved somehow, like to find my place in like pushing my community towards, I mean, I guess for lack of pushing it towards socialism. Fuck it. Like, yeah, that would be good. I would like that very much.
We need a DSA in Florence, because what's the closest one? Charleston? Raleigh?
Yeah. And again, you know, DSA, I'll say it has its problems, especially on the national level, but fuck it. If you can get like a solid amount of people together to do things for their community, that's not out of touch with their community. Don't get it, do it for their community. Excuse me. Let me rephrase all of that. Let me rephrase that real quick, because I think that's something that people fuck up about like charity work too, is like, if to say there was a socialist organization, they don't need to come in and do stuff for their community. They need to be the community with the community. They need to be representative. Like, it needs to be made up of people from the community. And that's a completely different thing.
Yeah, that's the problem I have with being in the DSA in South Carolina. It's like, what is it? What are our chapters? I think there's like a chapter that's trying to form in Columbia.
Yeah,
there's like
Charleston.
There's a Facebook group in Greenville, and then there's like an actual chapter in Charleston. I go down to Charleston, like, or I used to go down a lot more. But like, I go to Charleston every once in a while. But like, I'm not a part of that local politics. Like, even if I go there just so that I can fulfill the one part of my DSA membership that I kind of want to, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily being completely like effective to, because like, I don't pay attention to Charleston politics that often. I don't know who's on city council. I don't know who the mayor is. I know there's some problems with like the police department and the BLM rallies and stuff like that. But like, beyond that, like, I'm not there. Like, I might be able to learn like how to start like a Florence, South Carolina version of the DSA from that.
Well, I'm actually a dues paying member myself.
And I am too. I pay my like student dues.
So like,
join the DSA. Link in the description.
Want to like start talking more about that? Because what we, you know, but again, I would
like the Lulu's crowd, or like the coffee shops in Florence. Definitely, that's a crowd other than Bean Bar. Fuck Bean Bar. Like those are places where like socialist kids hang out. Like, so really cool. True. I know a bunch of people, ranging from like maybe anarchist, like ML. I don't know if I know any anarchist IRL. But like, you have socialists there. I don't know if we all get along.
Yeah, but you know, I feel like we could find a lot of common ground, because again, if we're online and arguing with each other, we'll kill each other. But if it's like, if we're all meeting at a coffee shop talking about, hey, what would be something that we could like have in our community, or have with, again, wording is important, have with our community, and do with our community. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't want to leave it at the coffee shops, because that's going to be an extremely white crowd.
No. Well, that's my point. Like, too, like, again,
maybe me in some churches or stuff like that, because I think the Black community in Florence is fairly left wing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, so like the majority of the Democratic Party is, and that was one of the things, again, that like,
maybe my representative could show up, because I have one of the most left leaning politicians in Florence as my state house representative.
Well, there you go.
I'm trying to think of what his name is right now. I really like that guy.
I would say this is here's just an important real thing. Like, if the DSA did do something, if we did talk about this or organize, whether it was the DSA or just a bunch of people, it can't be a bunch of like white young people. Like it's got to be multiracial. Like it's got to be
That's what we were
representative
trying to
of the
form after those
community.
June BLM protests, but I don't think it really came through altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And I think after like the George Floyd buzz kind of died down, any plans for something like that really failed. And I do think even if Florence has a fairly progressive city council, having organizations like that can help, because I was not expecting like people like what was it, Schofield to win that seat that he was in, coming from the Theresa May's district, I think. Is it Theresa? No. Theresa Myers Irving.
Wow, yeah, not Theresa May. Well, sorry,
Yeah,
I was
wrong
I'm gonna be
person.
honest, I was just you, and then something did not sound right, and I was like, wait, no, hold on.
I was like, oh wait, I voted for this woman 3 times. I should know her name.
Yes. It's okay. It's late. My brain's not working either.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's important though. And I think there are members on like you could talk with on city council, or you could like find
there's definitely
leaders.
people that would want to join the DSA and be in the Democratic Party at the same time, probably.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there's this misconception online that the DSA is like, oh, there's just a bunch of electoral idiots. It's like, actually, they're more, have always advocated more for like activist kind of stuff and like community stuff. It's not necessarily go to the polls. Like that's part of it, but that's not really the focus, you know? And I think people would be really pleased with a refreshing take, you know, and one that's unifying. That's the only thing I will struggle with. Like I was having a conversation with someone who voted for Trump, and like I had a few beers, and we were kind of going back and forth for a while, and I was finally, it was like, well, I'm a socialist, and he was just like it stopped him for like a second. But what got him here? So here's the thing about, we were talking about vaccine mandates or vaccines or whatever, and he's like, I just think it's terrible that people are going to lose their jobs and have to pay their own hospital bills. I was like, well, as a socialist, I think that healthcare should be fucking free. So
I do also think there should be the vaccine mandate, but healthcare should be free.
You should be able to go and get treatment at a hospital without going broke the rest of your life. And I think that caught him off guard, you know, because it was about to be like a, you know, I think he's maybe bracing for like a I'm better than you because I think this way argument. And it's like, no. There's benefits to like thinking, living, and acting as a community and caring for one another, and like realizing it's not only about profit, and like, you know.
Yeah, I think having a DSA that is especially double-minded on activism and elections can help out a lot, because I remember when I was campaigning for Bernie as a volunteer, like I was going to sections of Florence that I never interact with. Like there's a half of Florence that I don't talk to those people. I never would go to school there. It is a very funny experience, because like after campaigning in those areas that are especially poor and minority, in contrast to like the neighborhoods where I think my neighborhood that my family lives in, it's a suburban like 50-50 neighborhood. But like up towards like North Florence, Quimby area, like I never go up there. I never interact with those people until I was in the campaign. And after 2 or 3, you get more comfortable in that area, because I remember I was campaigning around there, getting used to those like poor minority people, because like I'm campaigning for Bernie Sanders. Like those are the people that message kind of speaks to. And then you get to, I remember, I don't remember what exact time it was when I was campaigning, maybe sometime late January. I was just campaigning on my own, and it was a rich neighborhood, and I go to one house and get turned down immediately, and I have an anxiety attack, because this is like a rich neighborhood. Like this is it's next to like the country club, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm talking to a bunch of rich people. No one's going to listen. And like, having a DSA that talks to this like these, half of Florence is probably, along with a bunch of other cities, politicians just don't go there. No one talks to those people. They show up to the polls. That's their only interaction with politics. Having a DSA would be
people
great.
Pay attention when you only show up for election season and you don't show up any other time. Like, and so they know you're full of shit. And I think I will say, as a critique of Sanders' campaign in 2020, he should have been in South Carolina a lot more. Like,
Yeah, it definitely. I think that's the turning point, honestly.
Yeah, and like we're people in the South. It's about community. It's about trust. It's about like showing up when you don't have to show up and being there for people. And like,
to his credit, Biden should not have been able to turn it around like that.
No. That's a whole nother conversation. But like, we're aiming higher. You know what I mean? Like, so if we did something like that in Florence, if that did move forward, I would say that like, yeah, it needs to be. We need to make sure that it is, it's like,
intersectional, interact with the community
that's the word.
all year long.
Intersectional.
I don't know how
doing stuff.
I mean, I have my background in Florence, so that I mean, for the majority of our podcast, people aren't from Florence. They don't have an understanding of what this community is like.
Yeah.
But I imagine a lot of community, like mid-sized cities, like, or small-sized cities. I'm not exactly sure where Florence is. Maybe like 100,000 people metro areas, I guess is the best way to quantize it. But like, especially in the South, most of the community, community event things, community charity events are going to be done by churches. And those are traditionally maybe moderate to right wing, and they're going to be religious. They don't have a political message behind them, and if they do, it's going to be slightly right wing. I remember I went to a couple of mission trips over the summer because like the only way for me to go out and help people is through, I guess, my local church.
I mean, that is the state of affairs.
I flew to Texas to help clothe immigrants at a Catholic respite center, and I went to Kentucky to help help repair someone's house. And the Kentucky experience was especially, I guess, a learning experience for me because you're in Appalachia. We were in the western part of Kentucky, and you have this, I forget what the place is called, but it's a school. It has a soccer field, and it has those help things as long as gasoline. And in the span of maybe about 40 miles, that's the most helpful place you're going to find. And I mean, I didn't talk about politics much that week. I mean, I'm an atheist, so it's probably not in my interest to go talking about religion at all.
Sure.
But like, I can fake it, make it, but like that's a traditionally Trump and very religious like outpost there. Like it was privately owned, and it's helping people in that area, which is a good thing, but it has a political message behind it inherently because of the people that it reaches to. If socialists really want a on the grounds project, it's going to have to try and do stuff like that, because right wingers are already doing charity stuff. Even if they're like individualist and horrible people to like minorities, they are doing charity work, and they are outreaching to these people. We can't just pretend that we can argue online, even if I do it myself, and win elections every 2 years. Like we're the people, like we said earlier, like there's a huge group of Americans just interacting with other white Republicans. We need to, if we can, people like me that aren't going to be targeted by those people and can actually blend into them. If we can talk to them, that's generally very helpful. There's a lot of other guys like me on the internet. And we having those community things where there is a political message behind it. It's like, we're feeding you. This is what socialism is like. Us working together, bringing this feast into this church hall in order to feed a community. You don't have to go to McDonald's. You don't have to go to Wendy's or whatever other restaurant you can think of. You can go here. We'll cook a meal for you. You can have it, no cost, just a community bonding experience provided by what the future could be like. Because I mean, at the end of the day, what you're doing is using that as a chance to build community. Like, it's not just like, here's a handout kind of situation, like, because I think that is something, there is a difference, I think, between like mutual aid and charity, and like you're not just like trying to check off your Christian point when you go and like give somebody food. I mean, we're not the first leftists to realize, like, the Black Panthers are the reason there's school lunch or school breakfast. What is which one is it?
Well, again, there was that organization in Florence after the BLM stuff that they or the BLM protests that they were out. It was Next Is Now. Like, they were out doing that stuff in the community. And I was like, the last thing I want to do is come and show up and be like, hey guys, we should do this, instead of like, like, let me just call it whatever I want to call it, and then do the same. Like, I was
There's
like, how can
in most communities there's probably already something like this.
yeah? So like, how it is almost more makes more sense to like
join
as DSA members. If we did have a whatever, go join other people doing stuff, and like build that community, learn how to do it with them. And so when it comes time to be like, all right, well, we're doing something as an organization, please come be a part of it, because we care about, because our focus, like literally, like in socialism, is community. Like that is what we're trying to do here. And so that just translates really well. And you've already shown up, you've already earned that equity. I don't know, that makes sense to me. And where we're at in the United States right now, we're talking about like, what is the most potent weapon against neoliberalism? Moving the conversation around or away from like severe individualism, and
making sure your white friends don't watch Taxi Driver.
Realize that this is not something you should idolize. No, just Rick and Morty. So
Patrick Bateman actually did not kill most of the people in this movie. You understand that he's a loser, right?
It's all in his head. It's a metaphor. I just learned that word because I'm listening to philosophy podcasts.
Metaphor.
Yeah. I don't know. That's well, we got it. We should do something.
We did this podcast backwards, where all the practical stuff is at the end.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you have to go through and edit this. I hope.
Oh no, I don't edit my fucking podcast. I don't have time for that.
I hope this is kind of what you were looking for, and
I'm looking for content. I don't put stuff. I need to start putting stuff out more often, is what I always say to myself, and then don't do that.
Well, you know.
I think I like this setup a little bit more. I have stuff in the back. If you guys notice, there are now Pink Floyd albums behind me instead of a blank beige wall, which is, it's good. I also got stuck in a small room, which is not nice. But background. So
it is nice. I like it. I like your setup. It looks very chill.
It is a lot more chill than a couch in the middle of a room that looks like people are like, is he in a prison cell? And I'm just like, no, I'm not in prison yet.
Keep talking like that and you will be.
If I go down my law career, I'll be put in prison for trying to sue Chevron to release Steven Tonzinger or something like that.
There you go. I do have a question. Are you using like a ring light to light your ish?
So the camera I have has a ring light. And then I have a what is it, like a desk lamp light? You know that it's like two small LED lights facing against the wall that way.
I'm doing the same thing. Mine, I'm bouncing it off the wall right now.
Because I was noticing beforehand, I still have them, but I had like kind of raccoon eyes of where like there was no light going in there.
Yeah, I look like I have a sunburn. I don't know how that happened. I'm not sure.
But you have a little bit better setup than I do, because I'm kind of stuck with the couch. They did not give me a chair for my desk in this new room, so I'm gonna have to move that in next time I go back home.
Our chair.
Yeah, our chair, as if I have a roommate.
Yeah.
But it's been a great podcast. I'd love to have you on more. You're one of the 3 Twitch streams that I continue to leave on our YouTube channel or something like that, I think.
Well, that's really timely because I just started streaming again. So
I can put that in the description. Just, I guess, I think I do follow you on Twitch already. But I mean, if there's anything you want to promote, I guess go ahead.
I mean, yeah, if you're interested in like people just watching people play indie games for like a couple hours, come check out my Twitch. I'm normally hanging out there a couple nights a week. Some other things to promote.
DSA.
Yeah. If you find yourself looking for some sort of organization to be involved with, check out the DSA. They might have a chapter in your area. If not, I would say don't lose heart. Find different ways to be involved. Even if it's just having conversations with your coworkers and helping people realize, they have the right to say, they have the right to, oh my gosh, I'm struggling so bad right now. yeah, they have the right to unionize. They can, unless you, well, it's a struggle and stuff. Help people realize that their labor has value and that they have a right to say what gets done with it and not be exploited. Like, people don't have to be exploited. That's one of the things we're, against, clearly against exploitation. And I'm trying to think if there's any other, I don't have anything formal right now. I mean, I'm really just hanging out on Twitter, which is not.
Are you doing any music right now?
No, not really.
I thought you did something with Alex. What is it? Alex Melton recently?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to promote that and go check his stuff out, his channel's amazing. It's Alex Melton. He does a bunch of fucking covers. They're like, they're country covers of pop punk and pop punk.
Oh no, it's an old video he did 3 years ago that you're in, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm in a couple. I'm in a couple videos. I do some singing and I do some guitaring, and if you want to go check me out, I'm on his channel. And
yeah, if you can get permission to any of his songs, I can finish the episode with that.
I'm sure he'd be fine. I'll message him and see if he can do that.
Because I was able to finish the God's Not Dead episode with on Spotify only. I couldn't do it on YouTube because I got copyright struck, but with the song itself, which is really fun. But thank you for coming on. This has been the Leftology podcast, episode 15, title that I have not decided yet. It's there.
Random internet guy. That's
the title. Yeah. Thank you. Please subscribe, like, comment 12 times. It gives me a lot more interactions. But thank you most of all for watching.
Yes. Thank you.
And have a good morning, night, evening, or whatever time of day.
Sometime last year I became self